Now, 30 years ago, the world was in the grip of a new epidemic called AIDS. If you're old enough, you'll remember all the hoo-ha there was, the advert, that very famous advert that aired on our screens here in the UK. Terrifying times, actually. But although advances in medicine means it is now much more treatable, sustainable, life can be sustained in a much better way now. World AIDS Day is marking its 30th anniversary, and it is still hugely significant. Well, let's talk to Roland Chesters, who was told he had HIV and AIDS in 2006. 12 years later, he's written a book on living with the illness. He's here along with Chairman of Sexual Health Services provider Spectra, Andrew Stovold. Good morning to both of you.
Morning.
I'm always quite poignant on World AIDS Day, Roland, because I've lost friends to this disease, and of course it's been brought back to the fore a little bit with the amazing Bohemian Rhapsody film, and a reminder of what happened to Freddie Mercury as well.
And also the MP who stood up in the House of Commons just yesterday and declared that he too is living with HIV, which is amazing.
But it's worth reminding ourselves, isn't it, just how much we have moved on in such a short space of time, actually.
Absolutely. So when I was diagnosed 12 years ago, at the point of diagnosis, I was told I had 2 weeks to live. And yet, 12 years later, I'm still here, thanks to medication, the wonderful medical support that we can access freely in this country, not the same in many parts of the world. And we have to be hugely grateful for that. People are now, if they are diagnosed early, when they've been infected, get on treatment early, they will have a normal lifespan. There are still people that die from HIV or AIDS in the UK. Approximately 420 died in the last year. Those are people who were diagnosed very late, as I was, or people who aren't able to continue to take the medication for whatever reason. But people are living.
But what is important then, and what I mean, you know, the 12 years that you've had that you weren't expecting is a great testament to the medication out there. But this does highlight, Andy, doesn't it, actually how important it is. And I hate to say this, Roland, but not to find ourselves in Roland's shoes and to get that diagnosis early.
It is, and testing is one of the best forms of actually preventing new infections in this country, because when people get on the medication and that medication is working, they can't pass the virus on to other people either. So it's a major form of actually preventing new infections, and that's why, as a country, we're seeing a downturn in the number of new infections for the first time across the country.
But how far have our perceptions changed? Because we'll remember those ads of the 80s, don't die of ignorance, and that tombstone falling very heavily onto to the earth. Have people's perceptions changed?
Sadly, not. Not as much as we would want to. Although people may not die of AIDS or HIV-related illnesses as much these days, it's the stigma that's killing. Mental health is a huge issue for people living with HIV because of that stigma. The suicide rate amongst HIV-positive people is a third higher than the rest of the population. And so that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, in order to try and dispel some of the mythology that still exists around the condition.
And what bits of mythology?
That people will automatically die from HIV, that you can catch HIV just by standing next to somebody who's...
People still think that?
Absolutely. I carried out some research leading up to World AIDS Day. 2,000 people we questioned about their attitude towards HIV and AIDS, and almost 18% of respondents said that they would no longer be friends with somebody who they knew had HIV or AIDS. So 1 in 5 people would not wish to be associated with somebody living with a condition. And you have to ask why. And the reason why is that they are not informed or educated. Not since the icebergs and the tombstones, which was a campaign of fear, has there been a campaign of education or information.
Is that... I mean, there's two sides to every coin, isn't there? And the sense that because we're much better at detecting it, actually earlier on, we're better at treating it and sustaining it, you're getting that undetectable status and all the rest of it. Is the negative side of that the fact that people are less aware of HIV as a condition now?
I think it is, and the issue of stigma is really important. Yesterday we heard at the Fast Track Cities event that 71% of people surveyed in the UK would feel uncomfortable dating someone living with HIV That's a really huge figure. And in London, that figure only drops down to 67% of people. So we have a long way to go to meet the target of ending the stigma associated with HIV. And London is committed to that pledge to achieve that target by 2030. But we've got a long way to go, both as a city and as a country.
But in terms of, I was just going to say, in terms of awareness, though, does it worry you that also the figures showing that 74% of people surveyed say that they don't worry about contracting HIV or AIDS because it's not of their concern? That's worrying, though, isn't it, for the future?
Well, I think it's not about actually people worrying, but it's about people understanding the risks and actually making decisions that can protect their health and other people's health. So it's not about people being worried, but it's about people taking responsibility for their health and regularly testing so they know what's happening and they can actually live a healthy and happy life.
But we're left with this situation, aren't we? And I know it was raised by Lloyd, the MP, when he mentioned it in the Commons on Thursday, but the PrEP issue, pre-exposure prophylaxis, which can, I think, reduce by 90% the possibility of contracting HIV. It still isn't available on the NHS.
No, it's still on a trial. And you will remember all the media hoo-ha about that when the NHS said, actually, we don't want to allow it to be available publicly because why should we do that when we're not doing it for other conditions and we're not doing it for people who potentially have engaged in some kind of risky behaviour?
I think indeed PrEP is a really important part of the jigsaw puzzle in ending HIV transmission in this country and around the world. And it's an important option for people who feel they're at a stage in their life when they are at risk of becoming infected, and it gives them that reassurance that they can protect themselves. And we need to make that available to everyone that feels that's the right choice for them.
OK. Andy, Roland, good to see you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.